rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine is the moment millions have been waiting for, in the hope it will mean a return to normality. But many factors, like some of the vaccines being difficult to store, mean there is no guarantee they will be distributed fairly around the world. As people in rich countries such as Britain get their first shots, how can those in less developed areas get theirs as well? This is your COVID-19 special here on DW. I'm Chris Colbert. Welcome. African countries have been faring much better in the pandemic than many experts had feared. Despite initial doubts, for example, about the impossibility of social distancing in communities where large families often share a single room. But with the coronavirus vaccines rollout, developing nations could now run into logistical, financial, and cultural roadblocks.
The race for a COVID-19 vaccine is almost over. 3 inoculation candidates are in the final stages of approval. And for renowned South African scientist, Professor Shabir Madie, the road to a vaccine has been difficult.
So it's only been 12 months since we first discovered the virus that causes COVID-19. And in that 12-month period, what we've been able to achieve as scientists is develop not 1, but 3 vaccines that have now been shown to be safe as well as to be effective in preventing COVID-19. That itself is a phenomenal achievement in the scientific community. Included among these 3 vaccines are 2 vaccines that are actually being evaluated in South Africa.
South Africa has bore the brunt of COVID-19 devastation on the African continent. At the beginning of December, the country had officially recorded over 820,000 infections and 22,000 deaths. Infections are again rising amid worries of an imminent second wave. And South Africans taking part in vaccine trials are determined to play their part in fighting the pandemic.
I want to take part in this trial to prevent myself and others from getting corona.
But not all of the potential vaccines are suitable for the developing world, and wealthy nations stand at the front of the queue.
The Moderna vaccine that was funded as part of Operation Warp Speed is unlikely to go outside of the US in the foreseeable future, and that's the conditions of the US funding that vaccine. The Pfizer vaccine, which needs to be stored at ultra-low temperatures, minus 70 degrees Celsius, unfortunately makes it highly unlikely for that vaccine to be deployed in its current formulation in a country such as South Africa. So what's left behind is really the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is a vaccine that we're also evaluating currently in South Africa as being the preferred candidate for immediate deployment in the country.
Even if South Africa can secure enough doses for its population of nearly 60 million, community workers still need to convince a skeptical public.
I'm scared of the side effects and stuff. I have to know much more because, you know, all of us, we are sick in different ways. You know? You'll need to tell us if maybe I have HIV. Yeah. What are my side effects? And I'll take this certain vaccine.
Advocacy workers must also compete with the daily realities of one of the world's most unequal societies.
COVID is not one of the major issues they have to worry about. They most of the times are worried about bread and butter issues.
But Professor Madie remains resolute that South Africa will lead Africa's charge for a safe and sustainable solution to the global pandemic.
But I thought they were doing this outside when I checked it. The data that's being accumulated in the vaccine trials that we're currently doing will really provide evidence to make an informed decision as to which vaccines are suited for the South African context. Beyond that, it's really up to government to manage the process to ensure that South Africa gains access to vaccines and is effective in the deployment of vaccines in the public.
Government inefficiencies may mean mass rollout will only be reached in 12 months' time.
For more, let's bring in Ruth Faden. She's the founder of the Berman Institute of Bioethics at Johns Hopkins University and a member of the World Health Organization's COVID-19 Vaccines Working Group. Welcome to DW. Where do you see the biggest challenges for a fair distribution of these vaccines?
The challenges are enormous at the global level and also within countries. The global challenges have to do with the fact that, for reasons we can easily understand, if not completely defend, wealthy countries of the world have made their primary commitment securing vaccine for their own populations. This has resulted in a significant lock on supply for some vaccines for the foreseeable future. Countervailing that challenge is the existence of something called the COVAX facility, which is a global commitment to provide vaccine to all peoples of the world. What COVAX needs is more financial support from wealthy countries, more money coming in to COVAX, and also we need more wealthy countries who are not currently part of the COVAX collaboration to be at least thinking about bilateral commitments to low and middle income countries. Also, we need support for the World Bank.
On that note, G20 nations recently said they will, quote, spare no effort in ensuring equitable access to proven vaccines. How much is that commitment worth?
Well, let's put it this way. It's worth a whole lot more than the countries who are high income who have not yet made that kind of a pledge. And I include in that the United States, my own country. So while, of course, we never know until we really see what happens, what a pledge like that from a group of wealthy countries is actually worth, I have to applaud this collection of countries, the European countries, for even making that commitment.
Now, we see the BioNTech-Pfizer vaccine being rolled out in several countries, the latest being the United States. We know it needs to be stored at extremely low temperatures. Now, doesn't a prerequisite like that in itself hamper a fair and equitable distribution?
Absolutely. So this is a banner day in the United States. The very first people will be receiving the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine today in the U.S., but it is not a vaccine that is part of the solution to global equity, at least not in its current formulation. So if you were to grade that vaccine right now, in terms of the likelihood that it will contribute to global equity, it would get a poor mark. Reformulations, perhaps otherwise. But right now, we have to look to other vaccine types to address the needs of people living in low and middle income countries.
Essential workers and senior citizens are among the first to be vaccinated. From an ethical point of view, is that the right thing to do?
It's an important framing, and it is as defensible as other strategies that we can think of. The problem comes with the competing interpretations of equity that are at issue. So if you think about countries like the US or Britain or South Africa or pretty much many countries in the world, there are profound background inequities pre-existing in the population with respect to health and well-being more broadly. And those inequities are reflecting themselves in disproportionate burden of the pandemic now. So the challenge from an equity point of view is to make sure that your prioritization strategy addresses these gaps.
Ruth Faden of the Berman Institute of Bioethics at Johns Hopkins University and a member of the World Health Organization's COVID-19 Vaccines Working Group. Thank you for your thoughts.
My pleasure.
And now it is over to our resident coronavirus expert, DW science correspondent Derek Williams, answering your questions about the pandemic.
If a vaccine is not 100% effective, can you still catch the virus after vaccination?
First of all, no vaccine that we've developed for any disease has ever provided perfect protection to everyone, although a few, like those for measles or for polio, come very close. But because every person's immune system is different, in some people exposed to SARS-CoV-2, the new vaccines will not stop the coronavirus in its tracks. Trials in healthy volunteers indicate, however, that the candidates now being authorized for use in countries around the world are highly effective at doing so in most people. It's kind of complicated, but a simplified way of quantifying the efficacy demonstrated in trials would be to say that if you haven't been vaccinated, you're around 9 times more likely to contract symptoms of COVID-19 after an exposure than you would be if you'd gotten the shot. So it drastically reduces that possibility. But what's really interesting is that for a return to something like normal, vaccines don't actually have to prevent COVID-19 in everyone. If they can just stop the disease in many or most people, then that's half the battle, especially if they also limit its spread. So if they keep most vaccinated people from transmitting the virus to others. For every person that can't catch the virus and then subsequently give it to someone else, we're one step closer to herd immunity. As the virus finds fewer and fewer unprotected hosts, that'll slow the speed of the pandemic and eventually stop it. And there's another possible upside, which is that even if getting a vaccine isn't an ironclad guarantee that you won't get COVID-19 later, there are at least some indicators that if you do, the vaccine could limit its severity. So you might then very well have milder symptoms.